The smoke in the cabinet room curled like secrets escaping the mouths of dead men. Gas lamps hissed softly along the walls, casting long mechanical shadows over the velvet drapes and brass fixtures. A clockwork owl mounted above the hearth ticked each second with surgical precision, its gears synced to a naval chronometer gifted by Admiral Farragut himself. At the head of the great oaken table sat President Ulysses S. Grant, his hands folded atop a sealed folio that pulsed faintly with etheric wax. Rain tapped at the windows like impatient code. Outside, Washington steamed with fog and coal fire. Inside, the weight of a new war pressed down, one not of bullets and bayonets, but of engines, skyfire, and sovereignty beyond the stars. General William Tecumseh Sherman arrived first, trenchcoat soaked and boots scuffed from the muck of Reconstruction. Behind him strode Secretary Rawlins, gaunt and pale from too many midnight telegrams. A third figure trailed them, unannounced and unwelcomed, an older man with soot-blackened gloves, a waistcoat laced with copper filament, and monocle goggles that flickered with blue-tinged light. "Who is this?" Sherman asked, hand near his saber. "He is what remains of our advantage," Grant replied, rising with the groan of a man more soldier than statesman. The president tapped the folio once. "What you're about to see is confined to this room. Once viewed, it will return to ash." Sherman broke the seal. Rawlins leaned in. Inside, grainy daguerreotypes of towering scaffolds along the Scottish coast, strange launch rails carved into the cliffs, and what appeared to be a bullet-shaped hull wrapped in copper weave, nestled in a cradle of riveted iron. Stamped in the corner, "Operation Artemis, Imperial launch trial imminent. Target, Lunar orbital sector, Seleni's 1. A telegraph transcript followed, hand-inked and underscored in crimson. "Victory to the crown. Artemis shall rise. The British," Rawlins muttered, "intend to lay claim to the moon." "Indeed," Grant said, "and unless we act swiftly, they will." He opened a second dossier, thicker, bound in pressed mahogany leather. A schematic unfolded like a mechanical bloom, a titanic spiral tower reaching into the heavens, flanked by Tesla coils, etherium condensers, and steam thrusters mounted like cathedral bells. Project, Skyspire. Vessel, Liberty I Aethernauts class. Launch site, Utah Territory classified. The unnamed man in the soot-stained waistcoat finally spoke, his voice the rasp of 1,000 engine belts. "The Empire's device is a brute. It steals from science it doesn't comprehend. Their shielding is incomplete. If they light that engine, their crew becomes kindling." "And ours?" Sherman asked. "Ours ascends, if we build the impossible." Grant turned to the brass-inlaid map of the Union behind him. A single crimson pin glittered like a blood drop over the Utah salt flats. "The American Aeronautics Agency is hereby formed," he said. "Effective now. This project is off-books, off-ledger, and off-limits to Congress. The Skyspire must launch before Artemis takes to the sky." He faced the man, the steel of command returning to his voice. "I want a crew drawn from the ragged edge of genius and madness. A captain who turned his back on war. An engineer whose calculations frighten mathematicians. And a man who can tame explosions with a grin and a prayer." "That's unorthodox," Rawlins said. "So was crossing the Potomac," Grant replied. A crack of thunder split the sky, rattling the panes like musket fire. The clockwork owl blinked. "And if we fail?" Sherman asked. "Then the Union becomes a footnote on the lunar sands." London, Smoke and Spymasters. Beneath the gaslit vaults of Westminster's Obsidian Hall, a gentleman in silk gloves turned a brass dial upon his orbital astroscope. The ring spun, locked, and glowed with pale energy. A telegram arrived via pneumatic tube. He read it, smiled. "Yankee Skyspire confirmed. Engine tests underway. Launch likely within 60 days. He dropped the note into a glass burner. It flared green, then vanished. "The colonies wish to race," he murmured. "Then let them chase shadows. The moon was ours long before they drew their first flag." Utah Territory, lightning on the salt. On the edge of the Bonneville Flats, under a crescent moon and veil of electric haze, the Skyspire rose like a screw piercing heaven's gate. Men in grease-stained vests and brass-filtered masks worked through the night, hauling rivets the size of cannonballs, tightening valves, whispering prayers to the saints of combustion. The tower was over 700 feet tall already, and growing by the day. From its peak arced stray bolts of artificial lightning, tethered to coils ringing the launch ring. In a bunker beneath the sand, a vat of raw etherium, swirling, angry, barely contained, pulsed like a mechanical heart. It needed a cage. It needed a commander. And soon it would need the sky. The mountains were silent sentinels, and Captain Elias Armstrong had long preferred their company to that of men. High in the rocky wilderness, nestled beneath a canopy of frost-laced pines, stood a solitary timber lodge. The brass chimney hissed faintly with the exhalations of a coal-fed stove, and the porch overlooked a glacial stream carving its passage through granite bones. Here Armstrong had found exile, or perhaps it had found him. He sat wrapped in his long wool coat, a tin cup of black chicory steaming between weathered hands. His left sleeve hung slightly longer than the right, concealing the trembling fingers that had never fully recovered from the Requiem incident. He kept his back to the past and his face to the stars. Then the ground beneath him hummed. It began low, like the purr of an awakened engine. The birds ceased their morning chorus. The fir trees shuddered though no wind stirred them. A flash of pale blue, like bottled lightning, illuminated the forest edge. Elias was on his feet in a breath, his Springfield rifle drawn from the porch rail. When the second pulse struck, brighter and nearer, the earth trembled. Something unnatural approached, hissing steam, clanking gears, and the shriek of overstrained pistons. Through the mist and smoke emerged a grotesque automaton on 6 copper legs, its hull pitted and scorched. Tubes spat ether glow. Valves belched pressure. Its singular eye, an etheric lens rimmed in gold, swept across the clearing and locked on the porch. The captain didn't blink. "One more step, and I ventilate your boiler." A hatch clanged open with the wheeze of old hydraulics, and a figure tumbled out, coughing and waving a white handkerchief as though fending off cannon smoke. "Captain Armstrong," the man called. "Please hold your fire. I bring dispatches from Washington." Elias did not lower the rifle. "Name, rank, purpose." "Lieutenant Percival Thorne, emissary of the American Aethernauts Agency. I've traveled 6 days by rail, 3 by ornithopter, and 1 by this damned walker to find you." "Why?" "You've been summoned, sir. Personally, by President Grant." A pause. Then Elias stepped down from the porch with a slow, deliberate stride, rifle still aimed. "Speak quickly, Mr. Thorne. You're leaking etherium." The cabin, briefed by lantern light. Inside, the warmth of the stove battled the late autumn chill. Gears ticked softly from a brass clock on the mantel. Astral charts adorned the walls, sketched by hand, curved lines charting the paths of stars, moons, and dreams long abandoned. Lieutenant Thorne accepted a mug of tea, though his shaking hands sloshed most of it. He laid a folder bound in copper-threaded leather across the table. The wax seal bore the presidential crest. Elias broke it open. Inside, schematics communiques surveillance sketches of a Titanic tower under construction in the Utah territories. The Skyspire Initiative. Vessel, Liberty 1. Primary objective, Lunar Reach, Phase 1. Secondary objective, Outpace British Artemis Project. Elias skimmed, then closed the folder. You intend to fire men into the sky on a rocket built from boilers, tubing, and guesswork. Thorne smiled weakly. Preferably not guesswork. That's where you come in. "I no longer serve," Elias said, tone flat. "But you remember command. You remember consequence." The cabin grew quiet. Snow tapped gently on the windows. "I remember," Elias said. Thorne set down his mug and leaned forward. "Sir, the British are months ahead. Their Artemis device is nearing final trials. But our engineers believe their design is fatally flawed. If they launch, their crew will die. If we don't launch, they'll claim the moon first, and whatever comes with it." Elias raised an eyebrow. "You believe there's something on the moon?" "We believe there's something under it. Buried. Woken. Signaling." The captain turned toward the hearth. The shadows from the fire played across a tarnished photograph, a war company, a younger Elias at its center, back when he still believed in noble causes. "Why me?" he asked quietly. "Because you've stood at the edge of madness and not fallen. And because we need a commander who still asks what it's all worth." Steam Rail West. The ether locomotive roared through the desert, its triple smokestacks casting plumes of blue-tinted steam across the endless salt. Within a private compartment, Armstrong reviewed the files by the light of an ether lamp humming at his shoulder. The Liberty I vessel was not a ship. It was a glorified bullet, a reinforced copper capsule affixed to a volatile etheric combustion rig. Its margins for survival were thinner than a razor's edge. If anything faltered, there would be no crash, only detonation. The last page of the folder held a handwritten note. "Elias, this isn't a battlefield. It's a beginning. Go not as a soldier, but as a standard bearer. USG." Elias folded the note. The train whistle sounded, a long, wailing exhale of brass and inevitability. Outside, rising from the horizon like a god's spine, the Skyspire Tower loomed. Skyspire Base. The train came to a shuddering halt on rails that seemed to vanish into dust and heat. Armed guards in reinforced dusters opened the gates. Beyond, Skyspire Base sprawled like an iron anthill, dotted with domes, smokestacks, and turbines. The tower itself, spiraled like a colossal auger, stretched over 1,000 feet into the sky. Its apex shimmered with static, coils of Tesla lightning dancing between antennae. Elias disembarked, coat fluttering like a banner in the desert wind. He was met by a young woman in oil-streaked overalls, sleeves rolled to the elbow, a wrench tucked behind one ear. Her eyes were covered by tinted goggles that clicked with gears as she studied him. "You're the one they dragged out of hiding?" she asked. "Captain Elias Armstrong." "Lovelace. Ada. I run the math that keeps your tail from vaporizing." "Charmed." She didn't shake his hand. "You're late, and I don't trust military types." "I'm not military," Elias replied. "Not anymore." "Good. Let's keep it that way. The sky doesn't give a damn about your medals." A bolt of lightning struck the tower behind them, momentarily illuminating the entire desert in ghost light. The structure hummed like a cathedral organ possessed. Elias didn't flinch. He adjusted his coat and walked toward the tower's base. The future had a shape, and it was rising. The desert didn't whisper, it clanked. Out beyond the mining towns, where the Nevada sun baked stone into glass and mirages into madness, the old railway lines ran no longer. But just past mile marker 73, buried beneath a false water tower and a collapsed silver shaft, lay the Lovelace workshop, hidden from the world and powered by what it feared. A steam-bellowing lift hissed open beneath a rusted tumbleweed, revealing a cavernous sanctum of brass catwalks, suspended boilers, and pipes that hissed with volatile energy. Gears the size of carriage wheels turned with hypnotic grace. Calculating engines ticked out reams of card-punch logic. And in the middle of it all stood Ada Lovelace Jr., goggles down, flame hair tied back with wire, a wrench in one hand and a blueprint in the other. "Again," she barked. A nervous assistant flipped the ignition. The prototype coil spat ether sparks. Click, whir, pop. The etherium lens shattered. "Again." "But Miss Lovelace." "I said again." The room obeyed. It always did, even when it tried to kill her. Ghosts of Empire. Ada was no ordinary engineer. She was the heir to a mathematical dynasty and the black sheep of an empire. Her mother, the celebrated Countess Lovelace, had once mapped the very code that powered the Royal Automaton Corps. Her father had written poetry so incendiary it was banned in 6 countries. Ada Jr. had inherited both gifts, numbers and fire. But England had no room for a woman who asked why, especially one who rewired Her Majesty's airships to fly without permission. She defected, vanished, and built her own kingdom in the rock. Now she stared at the shattered lens. It wasn't the fault of the design. It was the fuel. The letter. That morning, a courier pigeon had arrived, not with a scroll, but with a brass capsule screwed into its leg. Ada cracked it open, revealing a strip of punch code and a familiar seal. AAA dispatch. Enlistment confirmed. Immediate transport to launch facility. Your expertise is no longer optional. The rest was coordinates. And a single phrase. Etherium is becoming unstable. Suspected sabotage. Ada burned the strip. She didn't ask how they found her. She simply packed. Within the hour, her gear was loaded into a gear-driven coach that ran on compressed lightning. The Nevada winds howled around her as she rolled toward the Utah line. The ride. Steam pistons chugged. The sands blurred. Ada sat surrounded by crates stamped with phrases like reactive lenses, do not breathe near, and circuit brains, fragile, unstable, pretentious. She scribbled in her notebook, fingers smudged with graphite and oil. She was trying to rewrite the shielding equations for ether compression fields under lunar thrust conditions. The numbers didn't balance. Not yet. And then she saw it. At first, just a shimmer in the mirage. Then a silhouette. Then a cathedral of brass and madness rising out of the salt like Babel reborn. The Skyspire. She stood in the carriage, mouth dry. A tower of spiraling steel wound like a screw into the sky. Lightning coiled around its peak. Steam hissed from 1,000 vents. It looked alive, and she was meant to tame it. Well, she muttered, at least they're not underbuilding. Arrival at base. The carriage hissed to a stop at a checkpoint flanked by Tesla turrets and grim-looking guards in dust-gray ether armor. She was waved through after a retinal scan, her eye color registered as authorized and likely dangerous. Skyspire base sprawled beneath her boots, a hive of gearsmiths, pilots, electricians, theorists, and saboteurs pretending to be both. Sparks flew from overhead cranes. Men in flight suits argued over stabilizer torque. Somewhere, a band was rehearsing patriotic marches played on steam organs. Ada ignored them all and made for the central lab. The sabotage suspicions. Inside the vaults, she found the evidence. 3 fractured coils, a punctured condenser, 2 shielding plates improperly grounded by 1/16 of an inch. Not enough to fail yet, but enough to fail when it mattered. Sabotage didn't need dynamite. It only needed fractions. She jotted down notes. Her suspicion narrowed to the power lines. Someone had rerouted etheric surge protection from the launch dampeners to the refrigeration systems, a move so subtle it would only show up in a full diagnostic. She ran it. The system blinked once. Unauthorized modification detected. Source classified. Ada stared at the screen. This project, she whispered, is already bleeding. The first glimpse of Armstrong. Outside, beneath the lightning-laced sky, she saw a figure disembark from the inbound railcar. Tall, cloaked in a coal-colored greatcoat, the stance of someone who didn't flinch anymore. He looked up at the Skyspire, not with awe, but with recognition. That, Ada said to no one, is either the man who'll save us or the one who'll die trying. Harland Keys was many things, a showman, a saboteur, a card cheat, and a man whose moral compass spun faster than a clockwork roulette wheel in a lightning storm. But above all, Harland Keys was loud. He stood atop a crate in the center of a dusty Nevada mining town, shirt half unbuttoned, suspenders flapping, dynamite tucked into his belt like a bouquet of mechanical roses. A crowd had gathered. Children, drunks, a lawman pretending he had better things to do. Ladies, gentlemen, and those of you uncertain, Harland shouted, raising a brass-plated detonator above his head. What you're about to witness has never been approved by church, state, or common decency. The crate beside him bore the words caution, reactive amberite, not for public display. He grinned, which is why it's going to be spectacular. the explosive performance. With a flourish, he stepped back, twisted the dial, and thumbed the trigger. Boom! The crate erupted into a spiral of colored fire, green, gold, and violet, rising into the dusk like a dragon of raw combustion. The crowd gasped. A horse bolted. A preacher fainted. Harland bowed deeply, coughing through the smoke, coats smoldering slightly at the edges. "Science," he declared, sweeping soot from his brow. "Now available in fun size." He never saw the marshal approaching behind him. In chains and chuckling, they threw him in a cell lined with copper mesh and locked the door with 2 padlocks and a prayer. Harland sat cross-legged, flipping a coin that sparked faintly with static each time it landed. "I've got a permit," he said cheerfully. "You've got 10 warrants," the marshal replied. "1 for every town you've turned into a firework display." "I prefer unauthorized pyrotechnic consultant." The marshal slammed the cell shut and walked away muttering. Harland leaned back against the wall, closed his eyes, and smiled. That was when the man in the 3-piece uniform appeared, impossibly clean, unimpressed, and carrying a scroll embossed with the American seal and the unmistakable shimmer of federal immunity. The recruitment offer. "You Harland Keys?" the man asked, though the question didn't sound sincere. "Depends who's asking and what you're offering." The man didn't blink. "I represent the American Aethernauts Agency." "Oh," Harland said, sitting up. "The Sky folks. Heard you were building a cannon to shoot someone at the moon." "We prefer launch vehicle. And we're not shooting just someone. We're recruiting you." Harland raised an eyebrow. "You want me to blow something up?" "We want you to design the Liberty 1 stage ejection systems, flame stabilization valves, and emergency abort combustors." Harland whistled low. "So you want me to build the part that separates the crew from the fireball?" "Precisely. You people are insane." "Yes," the man said, unlocking the cell. "But we're also hiring." Journey to the Skyspire. They didn't take the standard rail. Instead, Harland was strapped into a seat aboard a prototype ether sled, half train, half rocket, bolted to a reinforced track stretching west. The engineer gave him a nod and 2 earplugs. Harland laughed. The launch was exhilarating. The sled screamed through desert plains, past skeletal windmills and lightning farms. His teeth rattled. His boots smoked. His grin grew wider with every mile. When the Skyspire came into view, even he was speechless. It rose like a divine screw into the storm-heavy sky, its coils sparking, its steam cannons cycling with thunderous breath. Brass flags fluttered in the ozone. Harland leaned forward and whispered, "Now that's a fire hazard worth respecting." Meeting the team. He arrived in his usual way, unannounced, laughing and reeking faintly of singed leather. Armstrong eyed him from a distance, lips tight. "That the powder man?" Ada Lovelace Jr. adjusted her goggles and muttered, "He's holding a stick of lit dynamite in one hand and a sandwich in the other." "So yes." Harland sauntered up, tossed the dynamite into a bucket of sand, and wiped his hands on his vest. "Captain," he said, tipping a non-existent hat. "Engineer. I hear you need someone reckless, brilliant, and mildly combustible." "Welcome aboard," Armstrong replied without emotion. "Try not to kill us." "No promises." The test that went too far. Within a day, Harland had established a test site. He requisitioned copper piping, shockproof gauges, 3 barrels of thermitic gel, and a crate labeled experimental. Do not touch. He touched it immediately. The first ignition trial of his multi-stage ejection system went well, right up until it didn't. An uncalibrated valve backfired, vaporizing half a test tower and sending a fireball high enough to singe a surveillance balloon. Armstrong stormed into the hangar. "You were supposed to test the failsafe, not invoke the apocalypse." Harland, hair smoking, goggles cracked, grinned wildly. "I call that useful data." A quiet moment at the tower. Later that night, Harland sat alone at the base of the Skyspire, legs dangling off a catwalk. He held a small, broken stopwatch in one hand, its face cracked, its ticking silent. He thumbed the back. A woman's initials were etched there. He whispered something to the wind, something only the desert heard. Then he stood, cracked his neck, and muttered, "All right, Moon. Let's see if you've got room for one more fool." At precisely 2:37 local time, the comms array atop Skyspire's central spire began to stutter. To the untrained ear, it was merely static. But to Ada Lovelace Jr., it was discord, a misstep in a mechanical symphony. She sat bolt upright from her cot, boots thudding to the floor before her coffee had even thought to percolate. In the dim green glow of the array chamber, she activated the spectrometer, fingers flying across brass keypads and gear-linked relays. The etheric pulse was faint, but foreign. Not American code, and certainly not theirs. No, this had teeth. It was British. Within the hour, Skyspire Base was on lockdown. Doors hissed shut. Lightning rifles were armed. Surveillance lenses rotated with predatory precision. Captain Elias Armstrong stood at the center of the war room, jaw set like steel. Around him, the team gathered: Ada, Harland, Chief Mechanist Wells, and the newly arrived security detail, all clockwork quiet and rifle ready. "I want every wire traced, every lens checked," Armstrong growled. "We built this tower to reach heaven, not to host a viper's nest." Ada stood by the projector, rotating through intercepted transmissions. "This one repeated 3 times," she said, voice clipped. "Encrypted royal code. Originated inside the base." Harlan blinked. "You mean they've already got someone in our house?" "Or they never left," Armstrong said grimly. The spy was found 2 hours later. He had blended in perfectly, an unassuming technician, early 20s, blonde, quiet, kept to the shadows of the cable corridors. But Ada had programmed the comms to trace echo channels through copper lines. The moment he keyed in his cipher, she had him. He ran. They chased him through steam tunnels, vault shafts, and pulley lifts. Sparks flew. Valves burst. A gear-driven escalator nearly claimed Harlan's boot. But they cornered him beneath the auxiliary condenser, where lightning struck constantly just meters above. "End of the line," Armstrong said, revolver drawn. The man raised his hands. "Calm. Calculated. My name," he said, "is Thomas Blackthorne. And you're already too late." They put him in the signal cage, lined with Tesla mesh, guarded by 2 automata, and reinforced with ether suppressant coils. Blackthorne sat in silence. No fear. No defiance. Just watching. "Your British intelligence," Armstrong said, pacing like a tethered hawk. Blackthorne didn't answer. "We found your code. Your cache. Your transmitter." Still silence. Then Ada leaned forward. "You rerouted our surge dampeners. You'd have fried the whole tower if we'd ignited today." At that, Blackthorne finally spoke. "I wouldn't have let you die," he said simply. Harlan scoffed. "Oh, how generous of you. I came to observe, to delay if needed, but not to kill. I'm not the only agent in play." That stopped them. "There's another?" Armstrong asked. Blackthorne looked directly at him. "There are 5. They interrogated him for hours." Blackthorne finally confessed what the Royal Office of Orbital Dominion hadn't dared admit. "The Artemis device is flawed. Its shielding matrix was stolen from your designs. But we missed something in the calibration. If it launches, the crew will be vaporized within minutes." Ada paled. "That's accurate. I tried to warn them. I failed. So I defected." "You defected," Armstrong said, eyes narrow, "by sabotaging us. I slowed you down long enough to make you look. And now you know they're not just rushing to beat you." Blackthorne leaned forward. "They're rushing because they think something's already on the moon." He slid a crumpled note from inside his collar. Scrawled in grease pencil, barely legible. A pulse pattern. Lunar-based. Morse code. Ada deciphered it aloud. "Help us. Help us. Help us." "They picked that up 2 weeks ago," Blackthorne whispered. "From the dark side. And now they're building blind, desperate, and deaf." A long silence followed. Then Armstrong spoke, his voice low and certain. "Whatever's out there, we get there first. We get there ready. Ada turned to the schematics. Harland cracked his knuckles. Even Blackthorn, in his cage, smiled faintly. London, the man in the mirror. In the depths of Albion's Lunar Ascension Bureau, a silver mirror pulsed faintly. A figure approached, face obscured by a breathing mask, hands gloved in gold-threaded leather. A voice whispered from the mirror. Blackthorn is lost. The Americans accelerate. The figure tapped the glass. Ripples shimmered. Let them burn their wings. The moon remembers only shadows. The Skyspire sang in lightning. At full height, 1,260 feet, it no longer resembled any earthborn structure. It was an instrument, a coiled cathedral of brass, iron, and fury. Tesla coils crowned its peak like a crown of thorns. Vent chimneys hissed with steam. Ether conduits crackled like veins through the steel flesh of its body. The base throbbed with heat. Girders flexed. Pressure gauges trembled as the tower drank electricity from desert lightning and exhaled it back into the heavens. In its shadow, men whispered prayers they'd never admit to believing. Launch was 5 days away. The storm would arrive in 2. Armstrong walked the gantries with a clipboard in one hand and a holstered revolver in the other. His coat snapped in the wind. He said little. He didn't need to. Ada trailed him, flipping through pages of diagnostics and shielding equations. Every relay, every bolt, every weld was her business. Upper stage vent ports are still unaligned, she said. We're half a degree off. They'll compensate, Armstrong replied. At 150,000 feet, a half degree is death. Harland jogged past, 2 apprentices trailing him like puppies, and soot all over his sleeves. Stage ejectors test firing at 1600, he called. Assuming the thunder doesn't kill us first. Won't be the thunder, Armstrong muttered. It'll be the silence after. Out on the flats, the storm gathered. Not the usual kind, this one carried voltage in its bones and dust in its teeth. The clouds above Skyspire churned with unnatural rhythm, attracted to the massive charge building in the tower's coils. Etherlight danced across the horizon like fireflies caught in static. Inside the base, Blackthorn watched through the mesh of his holding cell. They'll strike the tower, he said to the guard. And when they do, pray your shielding holds. The automaton didn't reply. It simply adjusted its arc lantern eyes and scanned the room again. That evening, in the echo of the command hall, Ada confronted Armstrong. We're not ready, she said, fists clenched. Too many variables. Too many unknowns. We launch, he replied. Storm or not. You're forcing the odds. I've always forced the odds. You think that makes you brave? It makes you predictable. He turned then, eyes like coal under pressure. We have one shot before Artemis rises. I won't let another empire plant its flag above this planet. Ada shook her head. You're starting to sound like the people we're racing. Sheep don't make history, he said. Wolves do. She left without another word. At 0200 hours, the sensors glitched. Ether pressure dropped by 4%. Cooling valves surged unexpectedly. And then a soft hiss echoed through the lower thruster gantries, followed by the smell of sulfur. Harland, unable to sleep, was already down in the sublevels, tinkering with a timing assembly when he noticed the sound. Drip, hiss, click. He followed it. A man in coveralls, face obscured, was wiring something beneath the combustion channel. Harland didn't think. He tackled the saboteur head first into a rack of brass piping. Tools scattered. Ether sparks leapt. The man drew a knife. Harland drew a wrench. Only one walked out conscious. It wasn't just sabotage. It was annihilation. Ada and Harland examined the device by floodlight. It had been wired to detonate at peak compression, precisely when Liberty One's first stage engine would fire. Would have taken the entire tower, Harland said quietly. Ada nodded, and every one of us with it. The saboteur, an unlisted subcontractor, had false credentials, no background, and cyanide on his molar. They never got a name. Armstrong stood over the wreckage of the bomb, hands behind his back. "Whoever sent him," he said, "knows we're close." Ada looked up at the Skyspire, its coils glowing brighter than ever before. "Close to what, though?" she asked. Lightning struck the tower 3 times that night. The first grounded harmlessly through the discharge coils. The second surged through a half-secured relay and blew out half the South Labs. The third hit the upper stage nacelle and triggered a cascade so bright it lit up the entire desert for 6 seconds. By morning, half the launch crew were running on adrenaline, salt water, and shouted orders. The base reeked of ozone and victory snatched from the brink. But the tower still stood, scarred, smoking, alive. In the stillness of the command deck, Armstrong stared at the launch window projected in glowing brass above the table. Blackthorn had warned of more agents. Ada had proved the threat was real. Harland had nearly died saving the tower. And yet, 3 days, Armstrong said softly. Behind him, the storm rolled on, distant now but not gone. Just waiting. Dawn broke on launch day, like a blade across the sky. The desert was hushed, holding its breath. Even the wind seemed to wait. The Skyspire, crowned in frost and lightning, loomed above the salt flats like the spine of a slain titan, steam bleeding from its joints, ether coils glowing from within. Its silhouette darkened the morning sun. All along the gantries and scaffold arms, teams moved like ants in brass uniforms, shouting orders, tightening bolts, running final tests against the unrelenting tick of destiny. Atop the tower, suspended in her berth, the Liberty One waited, silent, gleaming, and filled with fear. She would rise today, or fall forever. For hours to launch. Captain Elias Armstrong stood at the console in the command gallery, brass-rimmed windows stretching before him. His coat was freshly pressed, his revolver holstered, his eyes unreadable. Below, generators hummed. Etheric condensers pulsed in rhythm with the heartbeats of the crew. "Final pre-launch report," he called. Ada's voice crackled over the tube, curt and clipped. "Primary thrusters stable. Etherium containment nominal. Math says go." From deeper in the guts of the tower came Harland's voice, hoarse and cheerful. "Stage ejectors loaded. She'll break free when you tell her to." Armstrong turned to Blackthorn, who stood behind thick glass in observation. "You're not on the launch manifest," Armstrong said. "I wasn't supposed to be in this century," Blackthorn replied. "But here we are." 3 hours to launch. The crew assembled in the pressurization chamber. Ada adjusted her flight harness. Harland checked the buckles twice. Armstrong pulled the straps tight with the silent expertise of someone who'd done it before, just never like this. A camera lens flickered to life, broadcast to the base, and to select secure locations in Washington. President Grant, seated in a leather armchair beneath the Capitol dome, nodded once. A single chime sounded. Armstrong stepped forward. "I won't pretend this is routine," he began. "Or safe. Or sane." The crew chuckled. It helped. But we were never asked to be safe. We were asked to be first. First to test the unknown. To challenge the stars not with myth, but with fire, steel, and grit. He looked up at the tower's arcing crown, its cables alive with blue fury. "We go not to conquer. We go to see. And if there is something waiting for us on that cold stone, let it know we came not with swords, but with hope. No applause. Only nods. No need for noise when the soul is stirred." 2 hours to launch. Ada sealed the flight deck. Harland bolted the hatch. Inside Liberty One, the air was still, filtered through layers of copper mesh and carbon. The seats were arranged in a triangle, facing inward. Their suits, stitched with reinforced wool, lined with pneumatic cushioning, smelled of oil and new beginnings. Ada checked her readouts. Atmosphere sealed. Harland tapped the side panel. Stage 1 locked and prepped. Armstrong placed his hand on the ignition sphere. Begin final sequence. Outside, bells tolled once, then twice. Then thunder rolled across the desert, though the sky was clear. 1 hour to launch. In the base below, Blackthorn leaned into the microphone. "I'm giving you one last warning, Captain. That signal, help us, we don't know who sent it. Or what." "I've heard the warning," Armstrong replied. "And I'm still going." "Of course you are," Blackthorn muttered. "You're American." T-10. The tower rumbled. Gears turned. Steam hissed. Etherium surged through the veins of the Skyspire, awakening every bolt and strut. Tesla arcs crowned the summit, dancing in time with the final countdown. Launch crews evacuated. Alarms blared. The wind stilled. And then came the voice. T-10. 9. 8. Inside Liberty 1, Armstrong gripped the console. Ada mouthed a silent calculation. Harland crossed himself, then laughed. 5, 4, 3. The Skyspire shuddered. The Liberty 1 roared. 2, 1. Ignition. The world exploded. From the base of the tower erupted a column of fire and lightning, blasting downward with the fury of chained gods. Steam engulfed the flats. The Skyspire howled. The Liberty 1 tore from her cradle like a bullet kissed by angels. She rose, faster than anything man had built before, a blur of brass and flame. The Earth dropped away. Inside the capsule, every bolt groaned. The crew felt the crush of G-force, spines screaming, blood heavy. Harland howled with joy. Ada gritted her teeth, watching the numbers spiral. Stage 1 separation now. Harland triggered the release. Boom. The lower thrusters fell away. Stage 2 fired with a crack like divine thunder. They climbed higher, and higher, and then... silence. The stars blinked into view. The shaking stopped. Only the hum of interior systems remained. Ada checked her panel. Stage 2 nominal. Orbit achieved. Armstrong exhaled. Signal Earth. Ada flipped the comm switch. Earth base, Liberty 1, do you read? Static. Again. Earth base, this is Liberty 1, status green. Please confirm. Nothing. No reply. No anything. Then the panel clicked. A low pulse. Repeating. Morse code. Harland leaned in, brow furrowed. That's not Earth, he said. The code repeated. HELP. US. HELP. US. Ada paled. It's coming from the moon. Armstrong's voice was the last in the silence. Then we're not alone. For the first time in history, mankind hovered untethered above the Earth. Liberty I, wrapped in polished brass and humming with quiet etherium fire, hung like a lantern between the stars. The Earth below was no longer a nation, nor a battlefield, nor a map. It was a jewel, blue and white, spinning slowly in a velvet sea. Inside the capsule, Captain Elias Armstrong stared through the observation pane. All his life, the sky had been an idea. Now it was a place. The ship was stable. The second stage thruster had cooled to half capacity, the copper coils still ticking as they radiated off heat. The crew floated, lightly strapped into their harnesses, eyes wide, hearts louder than the instruments. Commencing orbital arc, Ada murmured, flipping switches with methodical grace. Estimated lunar intercept trajectory in 91 hours. Harland unbuckled and drifted mid-air, arms stretched out. I feel like a fish in God's teacup, he said. You're going to feel like soup if you unseal your helmet again, Ada snapped. He grinned, undeterred. Worth it. Armstrong ran a systems check. Every dial agreed they were the first. The first humans in space. The first humans bound for the moon. And perhaps the first to hear it. Ada rotated the transmission dial. Earth base, this is Liberty 1. Status green. Please confirm receipt. No response. She adjusted the receiver. Liberty 1 to Skyspire base. Repeat, Liberty 1 to Skyspire. Do you read? Still silence. Harland leaned over. We out of range. We're never out of range, Ada said. She rechecked the ether antennae. Functioning. The signal generator? Still pulsing. Nothing jammed. No storms below. The Earth was just quiet. "I don't like this," Ada muttered. Armstrong didn't answer. He was staring at the red light blinking on the auxiliary panel. "Incoming signal," he said. Ada turned, but it's not from Earth. At first, it was faint. A single click, then another, then rhythm. Not natural, not ambient. Morse code. Ada pulled up the auto-decipher. HELP, US. HELP, US. Harland's voice lost its humor. "That's lunar side," he whispered. "Deep surface frequency. Subcarrier band." Armstrong narrowed his eyes. "Could be a glitch." "Or bait," Ada said. She adjusted the scope. The origin point triangulated within seconds, the Sea of Tranquility, near a jagged crater ridge that had never been officially mapped. "Impossible," Ada murmured. "There's no beacon there. No array. Not even ruins." Harland floated beside her, eyes fixed on the screen. "Then who sent it?" No one answered. On Earth, beneath Skyspire Base, Thomas Blackthorne sat restrained but far from calm. His handler had stopped replying. His fail-safe message had not gone out. He had one more trick. He tapped a small brass bead implanted in his wrist. "Phase 2 has begun." In London, the obsidian hall flared with energy. A map unfolded, lunar, ancient, and alive. Back aboard Liberty 1, the signal changed. Instead of just Morse, a sound emerged. Not a voice, not music, something deeper. A resonance, low, harmonic, a mechanical hum layered with intention. Ada paled. "That's impossible." "What?" Armstrong asked. "It's not just broadcasting. It's listening." Harland drifted closer to the console. "You think it knows we're here?" Ada didn't look up. "I think it's been waiting." The main viewport shimmered as Ada calibrated the long-range lens. There, just off their projected course. A structure. Not debris. Not natural. It looked old. Angular. Engineered. Bronze-dark. Moon-dusted. Buried into the crater wall, as though it had grown there. Ada's voice was barely audible. "That's not British." Armstrong leaned forward. "It's not ours either." The beacon pulsed once more. HELP US. Then the signal cut. The silence that followed was heavier than gravity. Ada turned to Armstrong. "Orders." He stared at the crater, at the impossible, at the future. "Plot intercept," he said. "We didn't come this far to turn around." Harland looked from one to the other. "You're serious?" Armstrong's voice was iron. "If someone's asking for help, we answer." The stars wheeled above. Liberty 1 changed course. Toward the moon. Toward the unknown. If you enjoyed the Skyspire Protocol, be sure to keep an eye out for Book 2 in this series, The Liberty Descent. Coming soon.